Hello, Christel Arcucci here, the founder of the Soul Purpose Network. And today's broadcast is with Ken Blackman. And we recently had an exchange on Facebook that created somewhat of a conflict. And I asked him if he would be willing to jump on a recording because he is also a coach and to jump on. And we didn't have a conversation before this broadcast. The one agreement that we made is that if either one of us doesn't want to publish this, that's cool. But we're jumping on with you to see what happens and how to navigate conflict. You know, there was one experience being had, right? We're on Facebook communicating, but two totally different perspectives. And so how to be in conversation with somebody that perhaps you disagree with and navigating this conversation. So I'd like to start by letting Ken introduce himself, and then we'll go into creating agreements about this conversation so that we can both feel safe in communicating this. So Ken, I'd love for you to introduce you and a little bit about what your work is.
Yeah, my name is Ken Blackman, and I'm a relationship coach. I've been at it for about 18 years, and I got my start in studying female orgasm, and what really struck me was not only the effects that female orgasm has on the woman, but also the effects that it has on her partner and the whole dynamic that takes place between two people around her orgasm. And as a model and a metaphor for how couples relate with each other in general. And so that kind of formed the basis of a way of coaching people that I don't see other people doing that's turning out to be really effective. And so, yeah.
Excellent. So thank you for being here. And so I'd like to set up a framework for this conversation so that we both feel, safe in communicating. And so my perspective of this is, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that, we had an exchange and two totally different perspectives on what happened. So from my perspective in looking to resolve this, I like to create the framework that there isn't a right or wrong, there isn't blaming, shaming as part of this conversation, but really just sharing our perspectives and coming to some understanding of what happened in the conflict, as well as, I'm not opposed to disagreeing, and I think that's healthy, that we can have different perspectives of what happened. We can disagree about key points in coaching and in working with couples. And, I primarily work with women, and that disagreement can be a healthy part of relationship. So that's kind of my framework, is that we both get an opportunity to share our perspective, and there's safety in that there isn't a I'm right and you're wrong framework. There's simply different perspectives, and exploring how to be in conflict without creating drama or without creating this I have to be right and you have to agree with me. So is there anything that you would like to add in creating this container for our conversation?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with everything you say. I am, as they say, in alignment with how you described it. And I agree philosophically with everything you said. And I wanted to add too, that just from my perspective, when I'm working with people, people can get passionate. And so there's this way in which they worry that their level of passion in the way that they live or the way that they interact is dangerous. And I think what people really want to avoid is the wreckage. And so I think passionate disagreement is also acceptable. And there's this distinction between that and criticism of the person that you're talking to, right? Contempt for the person you're talking to, or attacking the person you're talking to. So I'm all for disagreement, passionate disagreement, as long as people own their feelings, and then you have this really rich, amazing conversation that can potentially get all the way to a state of resolution, right? You get all the way to the other side and you're closer and like that. So
yeah. So part of why I reached out to Ken to have this conversation is because the whole thing started from a Facebook post that I had on my personal profile that in essence, and I'll put a link in the broadcast so you can go and look at it if you wish. But basically I was saying, asking about when a man posts in his online dating profile, no drama. And I was asking for different people's perspectives because it lands for me in a certain way. So I was like seeking to understand, what that means to men or what other people's perspective were. So, which is fascinating to me that it sparked this huge conversation, as well as it in itself created conflict. But it also is such a beautiful way of demonstrating like the difference between conflict and drama,
yeah.
So then with that being said, a little bit of now the viewers are on board with what the heck we're talking about.
One more thing for your audience to know is that you and I don't really know each other. Like we are so peripheral. Like this is literally the first time I think that we've ever actually had a conversation. I don't think I can't, to my memory, we've never interacted on Facebook. We're just in each other's circles and one of us friended the other and we see each other's posts. But this was literally our first actual interaction, right?
Yeah, I agree that, and thanks for adding that because it's important, that it's like, and things do get triggered all the time on Facebook. Somebody posts something and, I definitely had some strong responses to our interaction on Facebook as well as other things that happened there. And my willingness to be curious about you, and then to come to this conversation, to be in an interaction that a lot of people would avoid and not have, because there's conflict. So then let's go into your perspective of the exchange and what happened.
Yeah. So it's interesting because here it is. It's a thread that's ostensibly about people's opinions about, well, drama in general, but specifically what a guy is communicating about himself. If on his dating profile he says no drama. And so you and I started interacting, and I think our conversation was like it was simultaneously a getting to know you conversation. It was simultaneously here's a bunch of like misunderstandings that were like adamantly arguing our points, and then realizing oh, maybe there's a misunderstanding about what a certain word means, and it got into this whole territory. And where we ended up was possibly, because we're in the middle of the conversation, right? It's not resolved, but what's potentially a genuine disagreement about a completely different subject, which is, can you know another person's experience if you personally haven't had it? And so there was lots of passionate arguing back and forth. And so, while you and I get to model what we personally believe about how to be engaged in that way, are between like passionate engagement versus drama, right? All of that got to play out, and we got to model, all that stuff. So it was really like rich on multiple levels.
Yes.
Does that sound pretty accurate?
Well, I totally have space for your perspective and experience, and
Okay.
a lot of what you shared, it was my experience as well. In that it opened up both of those pathways that you just clearly defined, the one about how to engage in conflict without creating drama, as well as what started the disagreement, and what I remember is that I posted a response to somebody else, another man who's also a coach that is in our community, that I basically said, how many men have you dated, to him?
Right.
And and that started the like sparks flying.
It certainly did.
And so I want to go into exploring our disagreement and then come back to the conversation, and it might be brought in the whole, how to be in passionate conversation, as you say, which I really like, or be in conflict and stay present with each other, and to, because I think I'm not going to go there. So I'm trying to set that aside for now and go into this conversation, which I'm really interested in, our disagreement, because it was clear as we were getting to know each other, because, it's, from what I did know about you before this, I'm like, it's clear you're a coach, you're in the relationship space. And so we're getting to know each other. So then when I posted that, I said to another man, how many men have you dated? And then you and I started engaging about this conversation, where I brought in another example, because I primarily work with women, and a vast majority of my clients are moms. And so then my perspective was that I'm not a mom, yet I coach moms. There's a lot that I offer to those clients and a perspective, but at the same time, I don't have the experience of being a mom. So there's something available in that. Just like I was saying, there's something available in dating men that isn't otherwise available. And even if you were a man dating men, that's going to be, a woman dating a man is something very different. So, and so the thing from my perspective, that we agree upon is that you can help like I do and can help moms. And you do and can help women, even though you're not a woman. So I think we agree upon that part. Is that true from your perspective?
Yep.
So then the disagreement comes in. Well, I kind of shared just my perspective on that. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that element of the disagreement.
Well, before we go there, I'll say in a nutshell, but there's another really interesting thing that I want to ask you about, to see if it opens up something for both of us. So okay. My perspective is that, well, actually, let me back up. So with regard to your question about drama, what might it be with regard to that question that is unknowable to men because they haven't been a woman dating a man? What is unknowable?
So,
because that was from my perspective, that was the point that you asked. That was the reason you asked the question. What was it in response to that you're saying you don't know that because you've never dated a woman? You've never been a woman dating a man. Like what was unknowable?
So it was that statement, how many men have you dated, was in regards to, there's work going on outside my house. So hopefully the noise isn't too much, but it's also somewhat distracting. So if you see me looking around, it's because they're power washing the outside of my home right now. It doesn't sound bad? Okay, good. So with that, coming back to what you were just asking, so will you restate the question again, please?
Yeah. So we have a disagreement about how much or to what degree you can know another person's experience if you personally haven't had that experience, right? That's the question. And it may well be that we both disagree. So right. I want to get back to the context in which you made that statement to the other coach. Like he said something and you made a point by asking him, well, how many men have you dated, right? Or have you had the experience of being a woman dating a man, right? That was the context. So I want to get back to that specific thing and know whether what he was talking about was knowable or not by him.
Right. And so from my perspective, there is something available that only, but even so that is part of my framework, is that there is something that women's experience of dating men is different than men's experience of dating men, or men's experience of dating women, that there's something available in being a woman dating men that is that and it's more about the experience. There's lots that you can know about it because you've probably talked with thousands of men and women probably about men and women dating. So there's an element of wisdom, understanding, compassion, insight that you have from being an observer and being in that experience yourself. I mean, I don't know if you date women or what your relationship status is, but you've likely been in lots of relationships with women. And so there's elements of it that you can have understanding of it, but my point is more the experience of it. The embodiment of it makes something else available that, from my perspective, is not otherwise available.
Okay. So yeah, we're getting to the seeds of where we might disagree, because then in response to you, I came in with what I now see as kind of an arrogant or possibly even potentially taken as insulting comment about the nature of coaching, because I honestly, genuinely believe that based on the conversations that I've had, there came to be a place over a long period of time where, even though I have never been a woman, and I've never dated a man, right? I've never had that experience, but I've had so many conversations and have delved so deeply into women's experience that my belief is that often I come to coaching sessions where they're talking about their experience, and I can name it and describe it and feel it with equal or more articulateness than what they even are able to do themselves. Like, I'm able to actually paint a richer picture than they were able to fully grasp. And so I've come to feel as though not every woman, like, it varies, right? There's some women who come in and they've had a completely different experience. So I don't come in presuming that I know. I have to get deeply into her head before I have any, like, I talk to her for hours just listening before I speak. But then it sits in as a shared experience that women have, right? We're not ruling out the possibility that we're not saying one woman can't say her experience of dating men because she hasn't been this woman over here. Like, there's a shared experience, right? And I feel like an insider on a lot of that experience. And so after I've spoken to a woman for long enough and get on her map, then I have a richness of what it's like to be a woman dating a man that is potentially even richer and broader and more illuminating than even what she has had in her period of time as a person doing it. And so I think that's where we had this huge disagreement, and maybe we still do have a disagreement, because this was in the context of whether I'm still curious about what you were pointing out to the other coach he couldn't know by your comment. But in any way, that's my statement and my felt sense, and the bone of contention where, Facebook and comments and replies on Facebook is such a narrow straw of information through which to try and connect with another human being. So there was that going on too, right? Misunderstandings and like learning each other's language and, no, I meant this and all that stuff. So, but that's my stance.
Yes. Yes. So many things. So I want to touch on the fact of, like, it could have been easy, and I thought it, to just unfriend you because I was just like, had intense emotions coming up. I was like, I've never met this guy. We're just connected on Facebook. It would have been like, I did consider that, and I didn't do it. so I partly want to share that because I think we all get triggered from things people post on Facebook. Because first of all, writing is more likely, you know, the tone is interpreted by the reader. You know, there's all kinds of things about things in writing. We haven't met each other in person. And so why I share that is because it got to that point where I was like, I just unfriend this guy, delete his comments, and he is removed from my universe. But I didn't do that because I'm interested in navigating conflict with grace. And how can this create an opening? Like with what you just shared, you know, a bit of the subtext of what's happening for me is like, I'm feeling triggered by what you're saying, you know, that I don't agree, yet I'm also feeling a level of intimacy with you, that I'm feeling closer to you. I'm feeling myself leaning in. So I share that partly because it's like, even though there's a part of me that's triggered and disagrees with you, there's also the part of me that, because I feel you sharing genuinely, that I'm here, I'm present, I'm leaning in, even though it continues to appear like we disagree about this.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's really important. I've had exactly the same experience where, you know, as someone who's declared that he wants to make a change in the world, right? Like that's my vow to myself and my, you know, the universe, that I declared that I want to be an instrument through which the world gets better, right? And so I post a bunch of stuff that is stuff that I genuinely believe. And if anybody looks at my Facebook page right now, they'll see I made a very controversial statement that's on my newsfeed, on my timeline right now, that's getting a lot of it's very polarizing. It's extremely polarizing. And so there was a someone who often comments on me, on my posts, and often comments negatively on my posts. And he made a personal attack. And I thought, why am I, like, I already know how this guy reacts to everything I post. Why, you know, I could just get rid of him right now. Like, is this necessary? And I thought about it, and I just thought, is there a better possibility that I can volitionally, unilaterally stretch into? Like, just as my own personal decision to stretch into something that I haven't done before. So I engaged him. I ignored the attack and paid attention to the message. And I'm glad that I did, because, you know, then there came to be connection. So I know exactly the feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah, which I think is tricky for, you know, I think this is why this whole, you know, this bigger conversation of drama and conflict exists, is because lots of people are not willing to be in the discomfort of conflict.
Right.
You know, of disagreement, is like, oh, avoid it at all costs. So I'm going to say what I think my friend or partner, whoever, wants to hear. I'm not going to speak my truth. I'm just going to agree to avoid conflict.
Right.
So it's, you know, that encouragement to lean into uncomfortable conversations. And of course, then there's a fine line between, you know, not, you know, this conversation is not abusive at all, but at a certain point, it is like, it is best to eliminate people from your universe if it's abusive. But in this, you know, this conversation is very, very reasonable and actually very intimate, because it's like sharing the foundation of the work that you do and your purpose in the world. And it's also very vulnerable to be, you know, that I may say, I don't agree with you. Like, that takes a huge level of courage to turn towards that and to be in this conversation with me. Yeah. So
if I may, I think there's two things that we're doing. And first of all, thank you for staying engaged with me, right? Thank you for staying engaged with me. And thank you. I thought it was brilliant when, in the middle of a genuine heated disagreement, like genuine, you said, hey, I have this crazy idea. Why don't we get on, you know, do live video, and maybe something will come of the way, not only the conflict, but the way that we're interacting. We don't know what's going to happen. We're creating this very potentially volatile situation, but let's see what happens. Like, let's be brave and try that. And I thought that was brilliant. Like, my admiration for you, just like as one of the first things that I got to experience who you are as a person, like, wow, like that was amazing. Like, my admiration for you is really high, just for the thought to do that, the bravery to do that, and the invitation, right? So I want to say that.
Yes.
But then also, two things that I notice we aren't doing. So when people interact, there's exchange of information, right? There's exchange of information. And then there's exchange of packets of emotion. And what happens is there gets to be this kind of emotional echo chamber where you send your charge to me and I take it into my body and I crank it up higher and I throw it back to you, and you take it into your body and crank it up and throw it back to me. And so it escalates in this kind of echo chamber. And pretty soon it's 10% the actual disagreement and 90% emotions that are now outside their range to handle. And so they cut it off and the actual topic never gets talked about. And so two things we're doing that's different that I notice is we're more interested in the point of disagreement than we are in, like, tensions rise, but we're not escalating that.
Yeah.
And secondly, we're not attacking each other, right? Like,
right.
we're interested in each other and giving our perspective, right? We own our perspective, we own our emotions and such.
Yes, I agree. And I would say part of the key is we're not holding each other, like, you're not holding me responsible for your feelings, right? You're not shaming, blaming, making me wrong, or defending yourself. And from my perspective, we're both doing that. It's like,
yes.
I just spoke about being triggered. And, one way that I could have created drama is by attacking you in that, instead of saying, I'm feeling triggered. Which is a level of engagement that is so important in being able to navigate conflict, is that staying in our own experience and taking responsibility for how we feel, and then being able to clearly articulate it. And so thank you for being in this and modeling it, getting to know each other, right? Like, getting to know each other, having these charges happening and still being here and not writing each other off, right? Because we could have done that so much along the way. And I think we both stand for deeper connection through communication and intimacy. And so that, we don't know what's going to happen after this, yet it's, seeing those people that trigger us as an opportunity, as a teacher, right? And we never talk to each other again, yet seeing that disagreement, charge, emotion is an incredible teacher that often people run from. So it's like leaning into it and finding the ones that are worth engaging, right? Like, if you weren't a coach, I probably wouldn't have reached out to you. So part of it was because there have been other people I disagree with, and I just unfriend them, goodbye from my universe. But with you, I was like, all right, I think this would be valuable for both of us as well as our audiences. And I also think it's healthy to have different perspectives. It's why there's so many coaches in the world, and we're all working and successful. Well, not all working, but lots of us are running successful businesses, and having different perspectives and different founding values doesn't, it takes it out of that right or wrong framework, that it's just a different perspective, a different experience. So with that being said, we're having several conversations, coming back to the experience piece, which I think that, the where this disagreement kind of started is, and I do think that we still disagree with this, in that what you shared about your understanding of women's experience, that often you have insight into it that women don't have themselves. I agree with that. And I have that experience as well, that it's like I can, and I have that experience regularly with women clients, that I will share something and they're like, how did you know that? And you said that in such a way that like something opens up in their awareness. So I do agree with that. And I do continue to think that there is something available in experience that isn't available otherwise. Like what I would say is you have incredible empathy, right? It's like you can be empathetic as well as you can be in the energetic space of what it's like to be a woman dating a man. So you have that as part of your toolkit, which lots of people don't have. So that's amazing and awesome. So and also very valuable.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and I do continue to stand for that there's something available from experience that can't be experienced any other way. And one thing that, I continue to remember, as well as I often communicate to men in my life, men friends and men that I date, that it's like, as a man, there's just no way for you to completely know what it feels like to be a woman dating a man. Just like I, as a white woman, can never know and experience what it's like to be a Black woman in this, in this life. I will never know what that's like. I can imagine it. I can talk with women about it. I can have conversations with them about it, but there's a way in which I will never know what that feels like because I will have never experienced it myself.
Okay, let me ask you a question. So it's clear that we do genuinely have a disagreement. Do you feel like this conversation, if we continued with it, that something would be revealed? Or do you feel like we've both kind of given our statements with sufficient, fullness that, we can just at this point agree to disagree? Like, is there more to talk about it? Like, are you interested in a response, or do you feel like we've pretty much fleshed it out?
Well, I think that's a good question to ask, because now that it's clear that we agree to disagree, and I'm willing to do that. And I also am interested in your response, because I'm also, because for me, I find that, like, when somebody says to me, whether it's a friend, like when somebody says, and this is a common thing people are taught in communication, I know how you feel. Like for me, I'm like, don't say that to me. Like, so I am interested, because I also know there's something in me that creates a disconnection with that kind of thing. Like when a man says, I know how you feel about what it's like to date a man, for me, I like that creates disconnection. So I'm interested because I'm interested in deeper connection with men. And so I am interested in your response in what I just shared. And I also, am happy to complete this conversation. I don't need you to agree with me. So to
Right.
continue
Okay.
that, but I am interested in your response.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I would add to everything that you've already said is, um, yes, I do have, a lot of empathy that I bring to my coaching, and yes, that's there. And um, what I base my experience on is having been a curator of women's experience for as long as I have. Not that, and I don't mean this by comparison. I'm just saying the things, the foundations upon which I take the stand that I do is just based on, like, for if it were a guy out in the world, um, it would be very, very hard for him. Like, he has a tiny, like, tip of the iceberg experience of what a woman has. But as someone who dedicated his life to listening and curating people's experience, A and B, what has me hold my stance, even in the face of, like, I don't disagree with anything you said, right? I don't like, there isn't anything, there is an argument to be made that no one can know another person's experience, right? Like I know that I'm taking a stance against something that is very almost self-evident, right? You can't know another human being's experience, right? There's whole branches of philosophy that point out that you can't know another person's experience. And so what makes me speak in opposition to that is the number of times I've had a woman say, thank you for explaining that to him in a way that I haven't been able to. Thank you for, go ahead. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do.
Sorry, the power washing is now right outside, and the air conditioner vent is coming in. So sorry about that. Yeah. Bad timing for the power washing, because can you repeat the last sentence you just said?
Yeah, the how frequently it is that a woman says to me, thank you for articulating to him my experience better than I have been able to, and thank you for letting him finally, after years of me not succeeding in having him understand my experience, that your articulation of my experience finally got him to see something that I haven't been able to get him to see about my experience. So on a philosophical level, I can't disagree with you. It is impossible for me to know. And yet I have a basis whereby I don't agree if someone says, you've never dated a woman, so you can't know what it's like. I just simply don't, that's not. It seems from where I'm standing, from my point of view, that is not true. And so that's where it gets to the finer points of what is knowable and what isn't knowable. Like, was your comment to the other coach sufficient to shut him down in whatever point he was making? Like, you can't know that because you've never dated him, right?
Right. Well, with that coach, I imagine it just got him to stop engaging. Right? It's like he didn't continue the conversation. Right. So, but my point is, for us as coaches, we're in a position of power. And so part of it was just saying, like, beginner's mind, is like for all of us to stand in our leadership and know when to be available and open to something that we don't know, or something that we're not an expert at, or a perspective that we haven't seen before. So that was my point in making that statement. And the way I did it was snarky, for sure, And I also had a pretty good feeling that he's never dated a man. So in that way, my approach to it wasn't super skillful to say what I just said, which would have been more in service to the point I was intending to make, is for us, even as people who've spent tens of thousands of hours training, working directly with clients, working, workshopping our own lives, that there's still more for us to be open to, and to not get rigid in what we know or the approach that we take. So like that was the intention of that statement, which, the way that I said it wasn't a super skillful way to do it. It was just a snarky comment.
I can't disagree. That's absolutely true. I totally agree. We definitely, like, the instant I shut down, like I take a stance like I'm right and you're wrong without reason, right? Other than I'm right. Like, the other thing, like, as I start to feel into, I listen to you, and then I feel into what I feel, and your arguments are reasonable and they're compelling in a lot of ways. And then I feel into, okay, so But I still don't agree. But why? Can I articulate my reasons for why I have my stance, just as you can articulate your reasons for your stance? And then, number one, we've actually had a conversation. We haven't just said, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm not. No, I'm right. Like it hasn't been about who's right. We've kind of exhausted all of the ways that we see the world so that we can, share that a little bit. And, I mean, like we're 1,000 times closer than we were before. And look how much more well-behaved we are in hindsight than either of us. I mean, I wasn't exactly, a saint on that thread either, right? So.
Right. I mean, no, there was the one thing that you said that really, really was the thing where I was going to throw this guy out of my universe. We won't go there, because part of it is, especially in writing, on a Facebook thread, it's so easy to get outside of who we are and how we want to communicate.
Right.
It's so easy to just make assumptions and say snarky things, like the whole thing that started it, right? I just admitted I started that with snark, the like, how many men have you dated, knowing I was pretty certain that he was going to say none. So taking ownership of it, right? That even in this dialogue, seeing the context that this disagreement happened, on Facebook, and also that there's a person behind this interaction, right? Like you and I engaging, even though we don't know each other, like it landed for you in a certain way and you had certain feelings about it. The same is true for me, that it's like, even if it seems harmless, words are powerful. And words can create and destroy. They can create connection and they can destroy connection. And so I think, this has been a fascinating experiment, and as well as demonstration of when to choose intimacy, right? Like I chose to reach out to you, which felt very vulnerable. You could have replied in all kinds of ways or not replied at all, so I felt vulnerable in reaching out to you and saying, hey, are you willing to do this? Yeah. And I also chose you, right? Because of the work that you do, and also because of the context of the conversation. It's just like, okay, this whole thing started because of a common dynamic between men and women, that women feel that a man cannot hold her emotions, right? Which is what I shared about the drama conversation in the first place, right? Is the no drama conversation. To me, when a man says that, what it feels like to me is, I can't handle your emotions. And so part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you is I was pretty certain that you would be able to hold my emotions. So I wanted to give a demonstration of a conflict, me having emotions, me having intensity as a woman, and you being present and listening to me and engaging with me and disagreeing with me and having your stance and staying present. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
So in completing this conversation, we are agreeing to disagree, which is,
and in the face of having concluded that we have an irreconcilable, for now, disagreement, we're actually much closer than we were when we started.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel that,
where a lot of people would be, the disagreement itself would be reason for them to be more distant from each other.
Right. So there is a way in which being present in conflict actually creates intimacy. If we can be responsible for our own feelings, we can do our best to not shame, blame, make wrong, defend, is to be present, to listen, to know that Ken's experience of this interaction, this whole thing, even this conversation, is completely different than mine. And that honoring that we have different perspectives different emotions, different charges, different triggers. And the way to create intimacy is allowing someone to be in their experience and to stay present in it, so that that conflict doesn't have to create drama, right? It doesn't have to become us screaming and swearing at each other, throwing each other out of the universe. Right? It can be, wow, I feel closer to you and I'm interested in this disagreement. Like I'm still interested, even though we're completing this conversation, I'm still curious about this disagreement in between you and I, because of course part of it is it highlights something in me, right? It highlights a place in me where I'm like, I have this stand, which I know creates separation, which is part of why I wanted to have this conversation, is this, like, you cannot know my experience. Don't tell me.
To be fair, that is a very, very important concept. Like, it's a really vitally important concept for people to get, is that you can't know another human being's experience, right? Like that's like so foundational and basic, and so like it's really, really important for people to get that, right? So
right. And that's the part that's the most fascinating to me, is like, you agree with that, and yet then there's this other piece of
and I'm
your
fully
work,
I'm
which
fully
is
aware of how arrogant, like how potentially, how the potential for any woman to think I'm hopelessly misogynistic by taking this crazy stance, right? Like I understand that what, it took me a long time to step into, do I believe this, and if I believe it, do I state it, right? And so I know how, I recognize from other people's perspective how arrogant it could sound that I take this, that I openly make this claim, right? Like I'm not unaware of that, right?
right.
Anyway.
Right. Well, thank you for being here and being in this exploration and conversation with me. And, there's so many things that we talked about. And again, the main intention of this conversation was to give an example of when to lean in, even with a stranger, to create greater connection and intimacy that can happen in conflict. And conflict and disagreement doesn't have to create drama and greater hurt. It can create greater intimacy. So with that, do you have any other closing statements, thoughts?
I'm glad we did this. I'm glad you recommended it. Hi to your audience.
All right. Thanks so much, Ken.
Yep.